the speaker I'm about to introduce is going to come and speak to us about recapturing her calling. A call to arise. Hey, she's going to tell us who she is a bit as she begins. But briefly, her name is Pastor Lilian Wahu and Jiko. She's the lead pastor at Activation Church and founder of God's Girls Army Global Ministry. You can just hear God's Girls Army. Army. You have brought, you know, soldiers are not taught by simple people. They are taught by military generals because they've understood hierarchy and rank so that they can come and turn you into the army that God wants you to become. People who can give instructions to commanders like Barak and tell them we are going to war. And this one we are winning, right? They didn't go to lose. She already told him we are going to war and we are winning. There were no two ways about it. And so with the joy of the Lord and much celebration, come on, rejoice, rejoice.
Come on, you can celebrate our amazing. Celebrate the host. You are not the one who was here, are you? Tell your neighbor, we need to pray for this speaker. You need to pray for her because yesterday you all heard from the amazing Dr. Marion, isn't it? Come on, no Daktari. And then today, it was Reverend Liz. And I was feeling pressure. You're like, Lord, what do I got to say after this amazing woman? But I know I have something to say. Sindo? Yeah? So get yourself ready. As she has rightfully said, we are in a barracks today, isn't it? A God's Girl Army. A God's Girl Army barracks, isn't it? And I love my invitation to talk about recapturing your identity. I can't even think of a better topic for me to talk about than this one. But before I start, I love to talk. So I can talk. I can talk you all out until 5. You know? But before that, I want to introduce a few people. Because a girl like me must walk with an army. You do not walk alone. So tell your neighbor if you're always walking alone. Lesson number 1, never walk alone. Never walk alone, okay? Yes. So, I have the privilege to be here with 2 Taya. So, you know how you have peers, isn't it? And then you have those you mentor, and then you have those you look after. All right? So, with me, I have a group who are below me. These are my mentees. But I also have in the room a lady I consider a mentor, a big sister. When I go to her, I don't even need to know what I'm doing. You know, because actually today I was thinking about it and I was like, every time we meet, I don't even pay the bills. I love that. Because the ones I am about to introduce from below here, I pay every bill. You know, as long as I'm with them, I already know it's my wallet. But for this other one, when I'm with her, I don't even think about carrying money. I'm like, I don't even need to know how I'm going back home, isn't it? So help me celebrate my big sister. Her name is Taleria. Taleria, stand and wave to the people. Come on. She's like, are you talking about me? Yes. If you see a photo of me and Taleria, just know wherever we were, she paid the bills. Just know, okay? It wasn't me. And I have had such a good privilege of having someone who's gone ahead of me who is a friend, isn't it? You need those people. Even before we begin to talk about Deborah, you need those people, isn't it? But now, you cannot just be the one who is always receiving. You have also to be one who is pouring, okay? So I came with some of my mentees and I'll ask them to stand. Come on. Yeah. In the black dress, that is Gertrude Mercy, who is about to be launched as a pastor in the campus of Cooperative University, planting an activation church there. With her on the other side is the amazing Mila Margaret, our campus pastor for Multimedia University. Celebrate them, girls, even if you have not started to pastor. All right? And behind there is my namesake. I am trying to make her my protege. She's called Lilian behind there. She's still trying to be behind the scene. I'm like, Yani, we are getting it out of the heart by fire, by force. You can have your seats. Yes. So I'm so privileged they came with me. Yeah, so that you can learn. All right? My name is Wahu and Jiko. I love Jesus very much. I don't know what's going on. So, Wahu and Jiko, I am a mother. Tell your neighbor she's a mother. And then she's single. We are beginning by introduction. I am a mother to a 20-year-old boy, young man. He actually turned 20 this week, 26. So 2 days ago, he turned 20. I don't look old, neither am I. You know, there are those who say I don't look old because they don't just look it, but they are. So I don't, and I'm not. Okay? I became a mother at a very young age. I became a mother at 16. So if you are doing the calculation, oh well, you all need to see your husband. Anyway, it's important for me to tell you this part because I feel like it will help you understand what it means to recapture. Okay? Because if you're recapturing, it means you had lost it. Isn't it? If you're talking about recapturing anything, it means you had it, then you. So Wahu Anchiko is a God's girl, has been a church girl since she was a young girl, okay? So I started to go to church I think I was 5. And not just going to church. Me, I loved church. I spent all my days in church. Actually, my brothers keep telling my mom that I was beaten thoroughly. A lot. But for one thing only. Because I was in church when my mom thought I shouldn't be. You know, I'd been in church on Tuesday. I have left school. I'm in church. It is adult Bible study, but I'm there. You know, it is choir practice for big people, but I found myself. I'd sneak, I'd be there. I was that girl, okay? So in every way, a God's girl. In parade, if they needed a girl to pray, you know, the ones they asked for volunteer, they even knew, don't lift your hands because she will be the one. You know, I will be volunteering everywhere to pray, to sing. I loved Jesus deeply. And I knew me, I am going to heaven, never to hell. You know, and I didn't grow up in a very affluent neighborhood. So I knew Jesus was going to be my plan because this baby girl loves a good life. All right? And looking at my mother, my dad passed when I was young. Looking at my mother, I was like, this woman, she's not the ticket to the good life I want. The places I dream of being and the places I dream of going, she has not even fathomed. So I knew they talked about God. And they said if you could trust God, he could be your ticket to every. They talked about God, and then they said, God and education. God and what? Actually, the motto of my primary school said, education is the key to success. So I was like, success, I am getting you. So I am trying to say grades. I was A. I was a good student because it was God and education, and then we get sir. So during lunch hour, when other girls were eating and playing, I was at a prayer place. I would go to a church which wasn't so long. Those 45 minutes of break, I'd be running there to go and pray. And I would pray and come back. You know, and my mother used to say, what is this that you pray about? Like, you're embarrassing me in the neighborhood. People think it's because you're not even given food. Because you are always there. And then another woman went and reported to my mother that each time she sees me pray, when I leave, there are tears. So my mother was not a believer. So she was like, what are those tears you cry about? Tell me now. But she wasn't understanding. So this God's girl finishes her KCPE. And of course, education is the key to success, so she does very well. And she's excited. We are going to, you preach with me. We talk together. Where is she going? High school. And then, you know, high school, they talked about a boarding school. And I told you I didn't grow up in a very affluent neighborhood. I had always been looking forward to how I'm going to live. So high school was going to be the dream. At least I'll leave this neighborhood. Because my mother used to say, you know, you are born here, but you are not from here. You know, in her trying to tell me how I should not be hanging out with my friends, which I think is such a profound thing. Because what you're trying to say is that your environment defines you and this environment does not define you. So I was looking forward to go to high school because high school meant I'm getting closer to success, but also I'm going to go away from home. Then I finished school. I have passed well. I've come back home. And back in the day, people would be admitted to high school up to around maybe February, isn't it? So I am waiting. People are beginning to prepare to go to school. And then my mother is not saying anything. People are beginning to shonewa uniform. You know, my mother is not saying anything. People are shopping for the boxes. You know those boxes? To go to school. And I'm looking at my mom. And then each time I ask her that conversation, she has a face. And we all know when mothers have a face. The face like, do not disturb me. The face like, I'm not ready to have this conversation right now. My mom used to have one of those. So I'd be like, am I supposed to ask or should I just chill because she knows how important this is? And January passed. And even the one who had performed the worst in my neighborhood somehow found a school to go. You know, each day it would be a day I get out and I see someone who has carried a sanduku to go to school. And of course, because see you are that girl who was not hanging out with everybody, the prayer one, the one the village considers to be una kwangana maringo. They're all looking at you like, what's going on with your life? Like when are you going to school? And I hated that question because I kept feeling like I don't know what to do. And it felt like feeling like this one thing I wanted so much seems to be, I can't achieve it. By February, see, all Form 1s have gone. And so one of those days I am in the house and I'm crying and my mama comes and I'm like, you need to talk to me. And my mama looks at me in the eye and she tells me, don't you think I wanted to go to school? Haven't I been the one who's told you about school all these years? Haven't I been the one who's encouraged you? So I know the importance of school. So if you're not in one, it's because we are not at a place where we are capable to have you go to one. So I need you to woman up, shut your mouth, like no tears in this house, and don't you ask me that question. I will tell you when I'm ready. You're like, wow, what do you say after that? And that night, I didn't respond. I went to my room, and I remember that night as if it was yesterday, because I cried a bucket. But not only was I disappointed, but I was hugely disappointed by my mom, because when my brother was going to school, I felt like she had figured that out. I have a big brother. I was like, you know how important this is to me, but it wasn't my mom that disappointed me the most. It was God that disappointed me the most. Because all those lunch hours, I'm getting emotional. I prayed because I wanted God to provide. And they said he is Jehovah Jireh, the God who does what? As a little girl, they said, if you seek first the kingdom, all these other things shall be. So I thought I did my part. I sought the king. I was disciplined. I was where I was supposed to be when I was supposed to be. Then why is this happening to me? How can you allow for my mom's business to be doing bad at this time when it is my time? Remember I said every day was marked with me being in church. I would find every excuse possible to be in church. But from that day forward, I was like, this God thing is a fallacy. It is a lie. And I was like, God, me and you are done. Like if there's done, I am, actually I will live my life. I will take control of my life. Because they said you surrender, you will lead. Now it looks like I surrendered, you're not leading. Let me lead. Let me figure this out. And the next season, my mom would go to work. My brothers were all in school. So, see, I was the one being left at home. A lot of times you'd finish with chores at about 9 a.m. And before, of course, I'd be waiting to go for lunch hour, then come back. And then I'd be waiting to go we had different things happening in the evenings. Now that is no longer happening. I used to love to read. And there were specific books my mother used to not like me reading. But my big brother used to have them somewhere. So I was like, okay. And I'm not allowed to, at the time I was not allowed to get out of the compound. So a girl buried herself in some fantasy love novels. You know them, those ones, eh? Yeah. You know them. I would read and read. My mom would find me in that. And for her, she would think, okay, at least she's at home. She's not disturbing anybody. Isn't it? And then I'd go cook, do the things I'm supposed to do. But God and everyone in the house actually had an attitude. Don't talk to me. I'll do what I need to do when I need to do it. And then just let me be. All right? And as I enjoyed these books, I found there is a different kind of love out there. Isn't it? Because all these girls a lot of those stories have someone who is a guy who seems to be a knight in shining armor who comes and rescues you, and then you have this love story, isn't it? And then in my teenage self, I thought, maybe this is what a girl needs, okay? And then one day at the right time, I was sitting outside. We didn't have a fence in our home. And the boy from the neighborhood, like right across, who had lived there forever as long as I had, but we had never spoken. Because remember, in church, boys were not good people to talk to. And in my mother's household, also, the only good boys were your brothers. Okay? But this one day, because I had been sitting there every day, and I remember it very well, he waved some flowers he had plucked from his And he did this. And I remember looking at him. And I remember thinking, Amen. So I smiled back. I used to be known as an Leoness in the neighborhood. That day I smiled back. And then he said, come closer. What did the girl do? She came. And that guy had lines. Because he didn't start at all. He told me, what are you reading? And I was reading. I was like, he said, I notice how much you love to read and you sit by yourself. So moving forward, can we do this? I also enjoy to read. Let's be exchanging books. And I was like, sounds so good because, I want to cut the long story short to say that guy had a twin brother who looked so the same, so I didn't know how to tell them between. Okay? So I didn't know, honestly. I thought I was talking to one guy all along. And then it turned out I was talking to another, and then they never told me it's not one. But his twin brother, the only thing I could tell, I used to wonder how come he's changing. Because one used to be like very friendly vibes, very bro vibes. And then the other one had very, you get what I'm saying? Even the way he looked at me. So I used to wonder, today it's like you're feeling me. Tomorrow is like you're not. And then I figured later they were actually two. But they asked me, because truly I was known to be in the neighborhood, to be doing well, to be a church girl. So they asked me, why don't you go to school? We thought you're supposed to be in school. So I told them my story, or I told one. But it looks like the following day I would continue the story to another. You get what I'm saying? Because I didn't know I was telling two. And then they told me, but as the school we went to, my father knows the principal. I was like, And they're like, you know what? We could actually talk to our dad, to talk to the principal who could get you in school, because already you can get a sponsorship because already you're a bright student and they take students about 450 marks, which I'd qualified. So, cut the long story short, they actually do the connection. And then I come tell my mom. I don't tell the boys. I'm like, that family. And she hears the deal. And I think also in her desperation, she didn't want to know much details. She was like, we're taking this. And in about a week or two, I wore my skirt and tucked in. And I was going to high school. It wasn't boarding, but it was school. Because it was a day school. But for me, it was at least the key to success. We are back on track. Sindio? But what I want you to pick is, who has given this solution? According to me, is it God? It's not, isn't it? It is this dude that I met who has been the solution to the very one thing I looked for. I will cut a long story short. Next, call me so that I finish this story and tell you how come he is the father of my 20-year-old son. The details, Nione Kando, take me for coffee, lunch, and we can talk about that. Huh? You shall pay the bills. Yes, that must be it. You must pay the bill. But after that, for about 2 years, because I got pregnant at Form 2. And let me tell you how the devil is a liar. So after the 1 year, I schooled in the city. The high school was in the city. So I'd come to Nairobi, like the CBD, and go back home. So that whole year, these guys, we were just friends. This other one, I knew there was a vibing going on, but we were just... And then my mother picked it. This Nairobi school is changing my daughter. The way she talks. Remember church things, I left them. Okay? Those things, I go on Sunday, I sit at the back, and I'm waiting to finish because it's Sunday, and then I go home, isn't it? But she started to pick out, and God had helped her at the time. She had gotten summer, and she knew how much I had always wanted a boarding school. So that December, she came and told me, finally, my daughter, you are going to go to that school you always wanted. And I was like, oh my God, a boarding school. And so she had bought everything, gotten the school. Everything was where it was supposed to be. And in January 5th of 2005, yes, 4, 5 there. I remember it clearly because that was the day. January 4th was the day I was supposed to go to school the next day. So after spending, shopping, you're with your mother now, you're excited. You guys are even besties all of a sudden because now you are. And then she told me, we had shopped and it was around 6. And then we looked at the list and then we had forgotten one thing. And we were leaving very early the next day. So she told me, I want you to run. And I'm giving you 20 minutes. Say 20 minutes. You know the face of an African mother when she's trying to warn you. I'm giving you to run. Get this thing and come because it's almost dark. And I have 3 brothers. I'm the only girl. I grew up very guarded and protected, never being allowed to go alone anywhere. So it's like 20 minutes, run and come back. And I said, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am. But all along, this week, I had been so busy that I had not gone to my neighbors and my boyfriends, those my guy friends, to tell them that now I'm no longer going to be part of the gang, because I had become part of the gang. You know, we were working together. I mean, it was such a good squad for me, or so I thought. So I knew this is the moment. I'm going to rush there quickly and tell them, say my goodbyes, isn't it? And let me tell you, the devil, usually they used to have like 10 brothers in that house. That day, because I told you they were my neighbors, I crossed the road to the next day. I cross the road and I go. And guess who I find? Alone. You know, yes, not even the bro one. You know, the vibes one. And then, but Kenyans, you understand. If you know that the houses that parents build their sons outside? So they had one of those, a small one. So it does not have seat necessarily, you sit on the bed, isn't it? And he was down on his bed. There's some music, reggae music going on. And then it was dark. They didn't have electricity. So I walk in and I'm like, he's like, oh my God, we've been wondering, where have you been? Eh? I'm like, now I told you, my mom, Aki, imagine I'm going to go to a boarding school. And he's like, for 3 months? Like, for how long we won't see you? Let me tell you, I have a big son. He plays rugby. So he has a big body. You can't even tell that he was made in 5 minutes. You cannot. If you looked at him, you would say time was spent. I'm telling you, in literal 5 minutes of what happened that I didn't even know at the time what was happening. I remember living in that confusion and wondering what just happened, because I hated it. And I wasn't ready. And I just thought, you know what? That is, whatever has happened, I'm so glad I'm leaving, because I'm never going to have to see you again. Isn't it? And truly, and went back home, cleaned up, and was ready to leave tomorrow morning and go pursue education. The key to success. I think it was about 7 months later that I found out I was pregnant. 7 months. We won't talk about that. But at this point, by the time I'm finding out I'm pregnant, I want you to imagine the devastation. I want you to imagine the anger. I want you to imagine the shame. I was like, how could I do this to myself? Because now life had gotten back on track. I was going to become that girl that I always told everyone I was going to become. I was going to become her. How could I mess up like this? I was in denial until the baby was born. You should know. You know, I was so angry. I wondered, what when my mother finds out? I mean, you know all those? And then I was like, God is punishing me. I see him. For all the days I left him, he's punishing me. He allowed this to happen because I wronged him. And instead of thinking that I should run to him for mercy, I got even more angrier with him. Because I was like, Kiani, you looked like a policeman. You know the people who are waiting for you to sin so that they hammer you a good one. That is how it felt like. God, you were waiting for me to mess up. Now you have found me. Because remember the other one, I was angry for him letting me down. Now this one was me letting him. But the feelings that came with it was again anger, frustration, shame. And of course I go back home and everyone is deeply upset, deeply angry. No one can even look at me in the eye. And I am ashamed of myself. And in that year, for me, I thought, my future, my life is finished. I was like, there is no coming out of this one. Like this, and then the worst part is you can't blame nobody. You are too. And I'm sure you're listening to me and you have your own story. You have places where you've been, you're like, this one is on me. I messed up. I got myself here, isn't it? And so I even thought, even if I turned to God, I mean, it's already too late. Or so 16-year-old Wahu thought. It's already... So I committed to my mom and I was like, whatever you need me to do, I will do. And then she was gracious enough to say, I'm going to take you to a day school. But everything about this child you will raise. I am helping you nowhere. And I can tell you the next 3 years before I finished school, I had the crazy, I think I used to sleep 2 hours a day. Because homework, school, baby, preparation, all those kind of things. But I was also determined to at least get my mom's approval back, if not my life. At this point, I wasn't even going for grade A or whatever. I was just like, certificate. You know. But along the way, tell your neighbor, along the way, we have a God who is so merciful. Because in my brokenness, in my lostness, instead of me pursuing him, he started to pursue me. He pursued me in such a personal way because I thought, let me go back to church. And when I went to church, instead of being received, the opposite happened. Like we always knew this. You know, the women of the church, by the way, it took me about 7 or 10 years, a whole decade of getting past the trauma of women in the church. Actually, until now, it's an oxymoron that the Lord would have me lead a women ministry. Because I've always been afraid of women in the church. Because the experience at that time was so traumatic. And now I think about it, I'm like, how was I even going through that as a 16-year-old, 17-year-old? But it was so hard that I knew right here I am not accepted. It was evident. It was evident you should not be here. Actually, my besties, the ones we grew up with, came and told me, we love you. We feel you, but we cannot hang out with you. Our parents will not let us. The pastor told the people, you cannot. So everyone was like, if I showed up and sat in a table, there could be a kind of, the atmosphere changes, and I knew it. So I decided, you know what, if I'm going to go to church at all, I'm going to sit at the back. But I could enter and feel the eyes, not see the eyes. Feel them anew. And that gives you some type of shame. And it begins to affect how you see yourself. You know your self-image? But I'm telling you, God in his gracious ways, he continued to pursue me. So my youth pastor at the time has known me since I was a little baby. I call him my godfather. All along, he's the only person, even when he had us pregnant, used to send me letters because I had refused to say him. And he'd send me Jeremiah 29:11. Every single time. He'd say one thing and put Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have. And he taught me that verse when I was young. So whenever I'd see it, I even used to know. When I see a letter, sometimes it's been dropped because they know I would know what is it. I'm going to be like, it's another Jeremiah 29:11. He'd put it in a card, he'd put it in. But he continued to say, if anybody else does not accept you, I do. If anyone else does not believe on the call of God over your life. And he used to tell me back when I was a nice girl in church, he used to tell me, God has a special call over you. And I believed him. So all along I had lived knowing God has a special. So when this happened, I'm thinking, I don't think you know. But he continued to. So one of those evenings, I had had a terrible fight with my mother. Because we used to have issues. Because we are trying to parent one child together. So we used to have drama. So I was so sad. I was so angry. And I went there and I was feeling so unaccepted. I was feeling like I am ready to exit this life. It is not working. And then I bumped into one of those letters. Again, Jeremiah 29. For I know the plans I have. And then my pastor, youth pastor at the time, used to write. I used to call him daddy. So he'd be there from your daddy. And then he would say, but you have a daddy in heaven who loves you way more than I will ever love you. And in that moment, I remember sitting down and telling God, if truly then you are a father, then I have never been fathered literally because my dad died when I was young. Can I begin to call you father? I mean, if I can't run to my mom, can I run to you? And from there, I started searching my scripture to understand what does it mean to have God as your father. And during my teenagehood, like earlier, even in primary, one of the things that I had really struggled with earlier is how in our books we'd write our names? So most people would have 3 names. They would say, it would be Lilian, Wahu, Njoroge, Marion, Ndungu, isn't it? They'd have their surname as your father's name. So I never got to write my father's name like that. And I used to feel as some type of way. Yeah? And this time, I started reading scripture. And I started searching up for places where there was a father. And I remember a day I woke up. Facebook was the only social media at the time. And I changed my name. Back then, I used to call myself Lily Flower. I said, Lily Flower, God's girl. And God's girl came from a place of, if I am not my mother's daughter, If the society does not accept me, at least I have a father who I can carry their name. And let me tell you, I can't think of a better way to start recapturing your calling than from a place of identity. Because I honestly found me when I found who he says he is. As I continue to search out about who my father is, provider, protector, guide, as like all the pressure to feel like I need to figure things out stopped. Because if God is my guide, why do I need to feel like I should know tomorrow? Yeah, if God is my provider, then even now he's going to provide for me and my son. If we choose him to be our dad, and I start telling my baby, if someone asks you who is your dad, tell them God. Let's not have issues, I don't know. Your father is God, and your father is my father. Together we have one father, and he's going to take care of us. And I started coming to that church a lot more confidently. If you look at me, I look at you. I am in my father's house, please. And I mean it. Those who know me from back then know I moved. They're sitting at the back. Where the pastors, our church had those pastors who sit at the front. I started coming and then I sit right behind the pastor. And if you look at me badly, I also look at you badly. I'm like, this is my father's house. Excuse me. But changing my perspective was my journey. What began my journey to recapturing my calling. I have identified as God's girl up to today, and I don't think there's a better identity for all of us who are in this room than to know yourself first as a God's girl. So when I was preparing, and of course, the girl is Deborah, and then I knew Dr. Mario will have spoken. Reverend Liz, I was like, on this same text, Lord Jesus, help me. But one thing that blew my mind was chapter 5 of this Judges. Because it starts by saying, I, Deborah, did what? Come on, you can do better than that. I, Deborah. She says I. Do you know the power of I? Yeah? It is saying I, Wahu. It is saying I know who I am. It is not all by accident who. It is I, Deborah, Arrow. And I was like, truly, truly, Lord, there is no better. You cannot arise if you don't know who you are. It's going to be so impossible for you to arise if you are allowing everyone else to determine who you are. If you're going to allow your past, if you're going to allow the things you've done or haven't done, if you're going to allow traditions, culture to tell you who you are, then you're going to miss out on the arising. Because ladies who are like Deborahs arise because they understand the power of I. I can't begin to tell you even my journey for many of ministry so far. And truly when I look back, it is this I that has, this I has been what has anchored me. When I have entered in rooms and I can tell they don't think I'm qualified, I'm like, I Wahu. Because I know I am God's girl. Everything in this room belongs to my Father. All power, all dominion belongs, and I am a custodian here on earth. So I show up, either you think I'm qualified, either you think I'm vibing with you the way I should be. I'm like, it's okay. As for me, I Wahu. Yeah? So today I want you to tell your neighbor, who are you? Ask them, who are you? Who are you? Ask them, let them tell you for a minute. Share with them, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? I, Wahu, I, God's girl. So he says, I, Deborah, I, Deborah, So before you arise, your I must be right, isn't it? So before you arise, you must sit with yourself. Tell yourself, call yourself for a meeting after this conference. Sit down with yourself. Sit down with who? Not with anybody. Just sit down with yourself and find out who am I? Not who have they said I am. Not what has culture, what has my paper said. Who am I really? And then once we figure out the I, then we can arise. Isn't it? Because now we will arise knowing who we are. Remember, Deborah is arising to go to war. So it's not going to be all cutesy, demure, and thoughtful. You know, it's going to be, she's going to have challenges as she moves. She's going to be working with men. You think working with Barak was easy? It must, she's not going to be intimidated just like that, just because she's working with great men. But for her not to be intimidated, she had to have her eye right. Isn't it? Imagine this great woman called Deborah has the audacity to tell a nation that I have the blueprint of God for your deliverance. I. Yeah? And I was reading that story, I thought, what a time to talk about Deborah for us as Kenyans. What a time. Yeah? Because chapter 5 verse 6 says, or talks about the reality of what was happening. I may not read because of time. And it goes there to show us how the highways and the byways, were empty. It looks like people were walking in the back alleys of that city, gripped with fear and devastation. A sense of what do? We don't know. Even the men, the warriors, did not have a solution. Isn't it? Imagine that's the circumstance. There is corruption everywhere. Kenyans. Mandamano right, left, and center. The economy is going lower and lower. Everywhere you go, everyone is crying, this is not working. It looks like everybody is afraid. And it is in that circumstance that Deborah says, then I, Deborah, arose. It is during a time when it looks completely impossible that the Lord is asking the women of Waridi to arise. He's needing you to say, I, arise. And as I said, you're going to arise just when you know. After you know who your I is. Isn't it? I'm trying to be nice. I can talk until tomorrow. I'm like, how do I summarize this whole conversation so that I don't keep these women until forever? So, just like we see in Deborah, we can relate it into our current realities, isn't it? Because I lead a young adults church. My people are like, how you're sitting cutesy, demure, and thoughtful right now? Then when I teach them, they can raise their hand and say, hey, we're not sure what you're saying. They're like, Percy, they can be like, Percy, wait, Apple. All right? So, if I continue to invite you to talk to me, talk back to me, isn't it? But really, can you see the similarities of Deborah's time? And a lot of my young adults, a lot of time is, how is this Bible story you're telling us looking like in our current context? Okay? And I want you not to just think about Deborah, because in that context, because you've been thinking you don't even know how chariots look like. We are talking about our war. You're like, maybe it's hard for you to relate to that. But I want you to think about the context for us as Kenyans. And look at the devastation of what is going on. And believe that God is also asking you and I to arise for such a time as this. Isn't it? I loved what Reveille said. That she arose with a sword and she arose with a song and different one of us, we are going to arise in different capacities, isn't it? Because she is described as both a judge and a prophet, isn't it? So the question I want to ask you is, who do you think you are? Are you a prophetess or are you a judge? Because how will we arise if we do not even know? Because this I, as I said, this strength of identity comes from who has God said I am? Who do I believe I really am? Because if that has not been farmed up in your heart, for me to confidently say me, like Deborah is like a judge, all right? A prophet, a prophetess. So who are you? Do you even know that? Have you sat down with yourself enough to self-evaluate and become so self-aware? Do you know your spiritual gifts? Do you know this is how God has wired me uniquely? Because if you don't understand that, we will talk to you about arising. And you will shout here, arise! And then you will go back home and be like, so how now? Isn't it? We must first figure out the practicals of how are we going to arise. What are the gifts? What are the skills? What is the positioning? Because Deborah is arising at her place of position. Because she was a judge even before this. Isn't it? Before the country finds itself in the place that they're finding themselves. Was she a judge? She was a judge, isn't it? So it's probably going to be where the thing, who you are, the thing you're doing, that place you're at. Huh? So, judge and prophetess. And then we're going to say Dr. Marion is therapist, preacher, teacher. You know. The question is, who are you? Do you even know who you are? But there's another character that I thought that in this we're reading. Because we must talk about this Deborah woman. Because I have found to be one of the weapons the enemy uses, especially against women. Now, I love that they said Deborah was a judge, isn't it? When I say Deborah was you say a judge. Deborah was a? Deborah was a? Now, if we think about a judge, what are the main thing you would assume a judge looks like? Just shout it out. Judge. Tough. Wise. Taleria. Judgmental. Okay. You know, all those things that you know a judge should be. And I was thinking about what it meant for Deborah to be a judge. And I thought that Deborah then carried a characteristic many women, me included, if we are not careful, can become our downfall if we don't embody it. You know, a judge does not judge based on emotions. We together? And women. Hey! Even right now, as we are sitting, there are some who've gone from 10 emotions in these sittings, isn't it? Yeah? From happy to angry, from I don't know how I feel, from I don't know. You know what I'm saying? We are super emotional, aren't we? And then, because of how we are wired and in our emotions, sometimes or most times, we allow for our emotions to dictate our becoming. You know, you are not arising in I just because now you know who you are, but now tomorrow, even though you are supposed to serve, you woke up feeling some type of way. So you texted your, department head. I don't think, I'm not capable of, I just feel like, you know how you say it. I just don't feel like I'm in the right mind space. Imagine a judge saying that. At your judge has woken, we have gone to court and then they're telling us they're not in the right mind space. What are you talking about? We don't need you to be in your right. We need you to judge. She can't allow for her emotions just because you came and cried. Are we together? You cried so much, so she judged for you because you were emotional. No, she will still stick to facts. Isn't it? That's a good judge, isn't it? If you went to a court and then there was a judge who was judging just because this one was shouting more than this one, you would think, what kind of unprofessionalism is this? No. That is what you do, you. You allow for your emotions to cripple your judgment. You are not showing up in the ways that you should show up because you have allowed emotions to become Lord over you. Let me tell you of an emotion that I had to overcome to become. Hey, I have rhymed words. Have you heard that? Overcome to? Come on. Overcoming for me, the greatest was the emotion called shame. You know that feeling of shame? That, if the Lord did not help me to deal with, I would not be standing here right now. Because of everything that I knew had happened to me that was my fault, then I had carried shame. Even though I knew I have the capacity to communicate, I would not. Because shame gives you a language. Shame does that. It gives you a language. Shame tells you you are not worthy. Shame tells you you are not capable. Shame says you don't deserve it. Shame says you can't. All those things, it's not that because you cannot, but because of this emotion, this feeling. And so in my journey of becoming, one of the things that the Lord allowed me to know, and I feel He has helped me help other women to do, is to deal with this emotion thing. We cannot, emotions are good used appropriately, but we cannot allow ourselves as women to be crippled by our feelings. Feelings of guilt, feelings of all those emotions you know. Because remember, who defines our I? Who defines your I? Trinity Chapel, Riru, Waridi ladies in the barracks 2024. Who defines our I? Say it like you mean it. Who defines our I? Who defines your I? Excuse me then, how are you allowing papers to define you? That now you cannot even serve here appropriately because you feel like I'm not qualified. How are you allowing yourself to be so caught up on social media comparing with other people? And now because they are leading women's ministry a certain way, and me, I know I don't fit in those, so I will not lead. Who defines our I? I promise you, if you have this embedded in your heart, there is no arising you won't arise. There is no place you won't go. There is nothing you will step on spaces when God asks you to. Because you fully know that the one who is everything, the King of Kings, has already defined you. Today, if our president calls you and gives you an office, yeah? And then you come back, all of a sudden you will be calling yourself based with that title, isn't it? And even if here at TC and our read, we start telling you are not that. So what do we? We have no power. The one who has power already said it, isn't it? Now imagine the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords has a definition for you. And let me also tell you news. Our God is not from China. He does not mass produce. You know? So you are not supposed to look like the other. Just like you are, uniquely, how you communicate. Don't try to be Dr. Marion or Revlis. I'm not even trying. I cannot be. But there is no better copy of Wahu than Wahu. Isn't it? Because God designed me exactly as I am, because who I need to be to accomplish the things that he needs me to accomplish needs someone who looks exactly like me, someone who's gone through the past that I have, with the kinds of convictions that I have, with the kind of journey I have with him. Are we together? So you cannot be consulting. Isn't it? I actually think perception is greater than anointing. I believe it fully. That how you perceive yourself. Tell your neighbor, perception is better than anointing. And share with your neighbor. Tell them well. Perception is greater than anointing. How you perceive yourself is greater than you saying, I am anointed for this. Because how you perceive yourself, isn't it scripture that says, as a man thinketh, so is he? Isn't it? You become exactly how you think about yourself. Are we together? You all know the famous story in scripture where there are 12 spies that are sent. You know them, yeah? They are told to go and spy the land of Canaan, okay? And the 10 come and say what? The land has giants. Isn't it? And these spies, actually, I like she has already said it. They say, we were like grasshoppers in there. First of all, you are a spy. How did you allow yourself to be seen? Because for them to say, we were like, so you saw how they looked at you, yeah? But do you see they are reporting about not who they are, but about how these people perceived them. I know they say numbers can't lie, but on this one, in the economy of God, numbers lie. They do. Because if we were going to go with their report, it is the 10 who said we were like grasshoppers, isn't it? And then there are these 2. Isn't it? So, it's going to affect how you show up if you're going to see yourself as a grasshopper. If you see yourself as I was telling my son, we were reading the story together. I told him, if God was emotional, like if our emotions are what appeals to God, these people, we could have seen God come and tell them, Aki, you are like grasshoppers. I'm so sorry. How are like you? Oh my God. But that's not what happens. It looks like you think you are like grasshoppers. Okay, let me move with the 2. Who see as I see, isn't it? So stop the pity party. Tell your neighbor, stop the pity party. Give them a high five. Tell them, stop the pity party. Tell the other one. I think they are not sure. Stop the pity. Yes. Stop the woishe. This happened to me. Oh, no. I was a teen mom. Oh, I got divorced. So what? Isn't it? You got divorced, but what does he say about you? Isn't it? Okay, you are raped. We are sorry. We don't trivialize it, but we must commonize it. Isn't it? Because 1 Corinthians says no temptation. Isn't it? Other than what is common to me. So even yours was common. So despise it and then begin to see yourself as who God says you are. Are we together? Let me now talk about arising. We've been talking about I. Remember, my whole sermon was on I, Deborah, arose. So we've done I properly. Cindy, we are taking, we've said we are going after this to have a meeting with ourselves, and we are going to ensure the I is figured out properly. Isn't it? All right, let's talk about because after identity, imagine if you have found who you are, found who God says you are, and then now you go back into a corner of a sofa somewhere and you sit pretty. You're like, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. How beautiful. You know, God has such a great plan for me. How beautiful. I mean, does it make sense? That was not why you were figuring out who you are, isn't it? There was a why. So Deborah arises. And what does it mean to arise? And so that you don't say, oh, that girl just said many things, but she never read Bible. Let me give you one verse only. Isaiah chapter 60 verse 1. I hope the people can be able to put it on the screen for me. Isaiah 61. And I love this because I started to think about what does it mean? That word arose. What does arising mean? How does that even look like to arise? Because today we are arising. If there's anything we are doing out of this conference, we are doing what? We are doing what? Arising. And you know, arising is an action, isn't it? If I tell you arise right now, you will stand. Isn't it? So for you to arise, it means you are at a different position. Isn't it? It means you are enjoying your comfort. And you have been called to take an action. And this conference is about calling you to action. Isn't it? Calling us to action. Move. Arise. Guys, on the media, if you hear me saying many things, I'm waiting for you to put the scripture. Yeah? Arise. Is arise a suggestion? Waridi ladies, please help me. Is arise a suggestion? No. What is it? I say it out again loudly. What is it? A command means you have no excuse. Isn't it? You have in this season it's not, things are not looking the way they should. A command is a command. Isn't it? You obey a command even when it does not make sense to you. Isn't it? Commanders in the real army, like physical army, those ones for barracks, if their commander tells them one thing, they do and then understand why they're doing later. Isn't it? They first obey. They first do what? Tell your neighbor, we will obey. We will obey. And because the scripture is taking forever to, let me remember. It says, arise and shine. For your your light has come. I love that so much. Arise. And then after we arise, what are we doing? Now tell your neighbor, are you shining? Because so many of you who remember you and I say we are the light of Christ. But if we started to audit properly and be honest today, a lot of you've taken that light and then you've hidden it somewhere behind here. You are zero shining. And if you're shining, maybe it's 10%. See, to be real. But the call for arising is the call to shine. So that uniqueness that God has made you, remember the I. Once you figured out who you are you a judge and a prophetess? Now begin to shine as that. I know for me, whenever I walk into a space, what I know, not just how I live my life, I know. I reveal a dimension of God to people. There are parts of God you do not know that you will only get to know if you know Wahu. As you watch me live, because I'm shining in my corner, I am showing the world that it does not matter what you've been through. God can use you anyway. It doesn't matter what background you come from. He is that gracious. Yeah? I wish I had time and I would tell you the God's girl story. You know? How? Doctor is telling me a bit. And she doesn't know for me, I don't know how to tell half stories. Like, you know how you need to tie this for it to make sense? You get what I'm saying? But just a little. So, 17-year-old, 18-year-old Wahu has now found out she's who? Back to the story. She's God's girl, isn't it? God's girl is like, I don't care about what the religious people think, the priest and whoever. As for me, I'm going to pursue a personal relationship with God, okay? So that's back. We are back. God and I are God and Jesus, we are back, isn't it? And then I have finished school, so my family has put up a business for me, which I'm thriving and enjoying. My child has gone to the kindergarten, so things in my world seem to be working. We just need this business to scale up because this girl needs to global trot. She needs fine living was the goal, okay? And then a church is planted at Multimedia University on Gatarongai. The pastor's daughter of my former church, the church I grew up with, I meet with her one day and she tells me, guess what? I asked her what? Say, yeah, last Sunday, I went to this church. First, I was surprised. I thought if you were born, you should stay to one church until you die. Like, for real. Even if you don't like it, you stay there. So I asked her, you went to another church, you. And she was the pastor's daughter. She told me, this church, they are so cool. Consider what she used to say, they looked like us. So she and I were a type, according to that church. Okay? So they looked at like us. I was like, what do you mean? She said, I can't explain it. Next Sunday, try. Ask Auntie, where is it again? You're not as excited to go, but you're like, where is it? So she told me, I was like, okay. She just told me, try it out. You don't have to go any other day. And because the highlight was that they looked like us, and us did not look very good outside there. So I decided this Sunday I'm going to go to that church. But if this church then is accepting, as they say, I'm going to be as ridiculously dressed. And I want to tell you, church people, some of them come, they are trying you out. As ridiculously dressed as possible. And then let me see how they look at me. I wish I had a photo. So I prepare my son and I. And fashionably late, we walk into Multimedia University. And they have Wathogs there. So I was like, if church doesn't work out, it would be an opportunity to show my son Wathogs, We're being real. Our church, we say we are a hot church, humble, open, and transparent. Okay? So that was the plan. Anyway, I enter. And I never sit at the back. Again, I walk with my ridiculous dress. I walk up. The pastor's here. I sat right behind. But first, when I entered, the usher asked me if I have a place I want to sit. I said, yes. I said, there. And she looked very... she actually, for this one, she looked determined to sit me where I want. She was like, which row? The front of this or this? I was like, the middle. And the middle was where the pastor was, The middle. She said, okay. She went there, pushed some people, and then she started doing this. She's signaling me to come. I was like, okay. So I walk in and I sit there. And they had a setup like this. And I was late. A guy who, at the time, I thought is just a guy, casually dressed, wakes up and sits there, and they have an interview, and they were talking about leadership and governance and how the church has a voice in that. And they had invited a guy, Mugo Kabatia, who was the Vision 2030 person. And they were talking conversations I had never had in a church. I was like, Kwani, what do you mean? How are you so practical? And then after they finished the interview, the guy stood and said, I'm so excited to have you. My name is Pastor Alba Sisilaba. And it was their second service ever. And I remember thinking, how can he be lead pastor? This one. I was like, okay, maybe I'm feeling what she was saying. They invited us for first-time visitor, which I went. And I want to tell you because this journey leads me to my today. Okay? So I go to the first-time visitors, and the pastor comes, says hi, asks us to introduce ourselves to everybody. And I stand, I say my name, and I say what I do confidently in my skimpily dressed thing. And I tell them I have a son, everything. He prays and he goes. Now, my church used to have pastors who are there, and we are here. You know what I'm saying? So we finish, and I'm thinking, next time, Sunday I'll try it again. I'm going to try. It could be that they're putting up a show. Let's try another Sunday. The next Sunday, I looked at the service times. I was late, so I was like, I want to come early. So my son and I again came. This time, at the entrance, I'm coming in. Remember that guy who they introduced him as lead pastor? He's leaving his car, and then he says me, in the most casual way possible. He comes and tells me, super, sasa. I'm like, okay, poa. First I'm like, wait, lead. I'm like, poa. And he says, during this week, and he wasn't sharing. Because hii week nilikuwa nafikiria, shop yako ya movies iko wapi ndo nikam. I was done. I was like, what you talking about? He remembers my name. That I own a business. I was like, okay, God. Anyway, that is not spiritual things. They sang well, they preached well, but for me, that is what God used to hook me. Okay? Immediately they talked about plug-in. People who are here know what plug-in is. So immediately they talked about plug-in and they were signing up. That day I signed up. But the other thing that also blew my mind, during the service host, they had this lady. I had never seen a woman like this in church. She stood there, she service hosted, and I kept thinking, I know this girl from somewhere. She was drop dead gorgeous with every swag possible. And then she said she's pastor. I was like, girls with swag can become pastors. With vibes and everything else can become, because the pastors I had seen, they were like nothing I want to become. You know? I was like, And then they said she's in charge of this discipleship. I was like, I don't know what all those 10 weeks they've talked about, but me, I'm signing up. You know? So I sign up. Let me fast track this story. During 10 weeks, plug in, and then you go for the retreat. And if you've gone for those retreats, they have a forgiveness session. Remember it? That's why I say emotions need. I did not know how angry I was until I did that. I did not know how I had allowed shame to carry it. You know, they did the illustration where you have how you're carrying even dead people. There was a practical illustration they did there. And I remembered everyone who ever said the thing. Everyone who ever told their child not to talk to me. That, you know, all those things. And I was wailing during that. I cried my heart out. But after that retreat, I felt like I had just become a new woman. And then during that retreat, that my cool pastor, and I haven't changed in dress code much. Don't think it don't happen as much, so easily. So I'm still me, And then he kept telling me during those breaks, he tells me, I think you're going to make a powerful woman of God. I would laugh hysterically. I told him one day, you don't know me. If you knew my history, if you know me well. And he asked me, though, I said, I don't fit into the traditional mold of a Christian woman. That's not who I am. I am a rebel for things of God. I just love God myself. But things, I'm a rebel. He kept saying it. And sometimes you will need people to call out who you are. And that is why you are in this conference today. So that we can call out the greatness in you. So that we can tell you can become everything God says you can become. So that we can remind you it does not matter what you did or what you've done or what you think you haven't done. But you can become it. It took for... come on, you can clap there. You can. It took for this man of God not to say it once. But each time we met, he'd casually tell me, do you remember the conversation we had? It did take even 6 months. Because he continued to... I asked him, what would that look like? And he said, how about considering to join the internship program of Nairobi Chapel for 1 year, just 1 year. And then get a feel of it, and then we can decide. And I remember when I made a decision, I told him, I'm not sure, thought about it. When I made a decision, I went and told him, 1 year only. And he also had made it look like it's not for becoming pastor. He said it is a leadership program for everyone who wants to, to serve God at whatever capacity. I was like, I can serve God out there, Anyway, I started my internship program September 2013. I had been in the church for barely 6 months. And I joined. I will say that it was barely 6 months down the line that this lady, you remember the one who I was so awestruck by her? They gave me to be her admin. I was like, what a joy. You need women who have been ahead of you if you will become. I mean it. Even right here, you need to say, when you're having that meeting with yourself, ask yourself, who do I want to become? And then who has already gone ahead? Because you will need them. I might not have had the wisdom for that, but they put me under her. And because I adored her, I looked up to her. Let me tell you, I became everything her. We even changed wardrobe. And she'd take me to toy market and we'd buy wedges. If I wear wedges now, trust you me, it came from that. We would do I even put dreadlocks because she had dreadlocks. I was a good follower. And then she was me in so many ways. I felt she's an upgraded version of who I am. She loved the same things. Would go to the movies, discipleship. And she discipled me. 6 months, she was pregnant, so she had to go for maternity leave. And then the pastor said, Wahu, you're going to do this. I said, as long as they never call me pastor. He's like, it's okay. I want to cut the long story short is because I took over the ministry. By the time she was coming back, the pastor was like, no, she can't come back there. You've been doing an excellent job. And then naturally, you all start calling people. Good. I would be so like, it's not happening to me, but I became. Now, I became pastor. After 1 year, if there's anything I wanted, it's for them not to even imagine that they can let me go. Who? Because I had enjoyed what I do. Remember, I'm the one threatening them, I'll stay for 1 year. All of a sudden, even prayed and fasted. Lord, please allow them to allow me another year. And after that 1 year, I was like, allow them to allow me another. So I did that, enjoyed it, serving God and everything for up to 2020. She said I shared the God's girl story, and I told you I don't know how to start half-half. So up to this moment, I knew the things I'm good at is being on the background like you think, okay? Because discipleship was a lot about preparing things in the background, never at the front, isn't it? So I had done that and done that well. I felt like the things that I needed to do, I could do them in my sleep. 2020 is coming and I'm asked to plant a young adults church because I had started a young adults fellowship, which to me was supposed to be a feel-good ministry, something I do after I have worked, because I had begun to feel like this ministry of church feels a lot like KPIs. And I was like, you know me, God, I don't just want to serve you for KPIs. Me, I want you to know you have my heart and soul. So even after I'm done with the 5 o'clock, what more can I do? So I had started a young adult fellowship at night where I could be, and it was supposed to be seeker-friendly, only going to the unchurched person, because Great Commission, isn't it? So this thing was growing, and then they told me, you see this thing you've been doing at night, we want you to plant that church for Sunday. And I remember kicking and screaming and saying, I am not ready. Me, I'm not a pastor like that. Like, I don't lead churches. Like, that's not what to the plan. That was not the vision, but they were the bosses, and I was the employee at the time. But God was using them. So I said yes anyway, isn't it? I did everything to prepare for this church. And then we planted 2020, February, the second Sunday. It was amazing. 70 young people came. I was on top of my world. I was beginning to think, this one I figured out. I have a plan for the next 6 weeks. Yeah, that's enough. That Sunday, COVID. Let me tell you, I was angry. I was so mad. And this point was important because I didn't know, kumbe God was setting me up for something else. I was so mad because I was like, God, I worked day and night, and I mean it, day and night, to ensure that I planned this church plant. And now just when we have gained momentum, and if you've planted a church, it is hard work. You should respect your pastors. It's a lot of work. So it's like how when things have, now again we are closing. So it means whenever I'll need to come back, I'll need to start again. I'll have lost everybody, you know? I was sad, I was angry, I was devastated. And then at the time, I have enjoyed good girlfriends for many years. And then at the time, there was a confusion. I didn't know what was happening with my friendship. It seemed like everything just wasn't working. And I was like, God, me, I have been a good friend. I've been a good girl. I have pastored your people. I've done everything. How could you do this too? I was still in my journey of mastering emotions. I had not well. So I was devastated. And then one of those nights, I'm crying. And God, and I'm very emotional. I cry a lot. So I'm crying with God, and I'm like, what do I do? And then, just like I had it. One of the things I was most upset about was my relationships, my friends. I'm like, my girls are not talking to me. I'm feeling so alone. My life looks... And God reminded me, do you know there are others of my daughters who have never enjoyed what you have flaunted on Facebook and social media and Instagram for many years? Oh, I would flaunt my vacations with my girls. I would be putting pictures of coffee dates. Sometimes I got disciplinary letters because we would do photos of us in bikinis, you know? You know what I'm saying? I'm with my girl squad. Me, I'm young. I'm thinking, what is wrong? See, I'm still saved. Kina Reblis, they have forgiven me. You know, I had that girl squad. Now it's not working. And I thought every girl has that. I honestly thought every girl has that. Godly friendships, people with the same values and everything. So I thought, how is it possible? And because I write about everything, I went on social media and I wrote, is it possible? You are out there and are looking for two things: godliness and beautiful sisterhood and friendship. In my humanness, I thought about 5 people will inbox me and then my friends will see, because I'm about to make this one the squad. The way I will, hey, I will leave this ones and now I have a new one, isn't it? In the morning I woke up. I put up a link for if you are those, follow me. And I woke up the next day, having forgotten that yesterday happened. And at the time, our WhatsApp group could only fit 250 people. And by the time I was waking up, the group was full. And then people were asking, please, Pastor, another of our friends are asking, can we get another link? And I was like, wait, women, wait. What do I do with 250 women? Anyway, I open another link, and they are full again. I'm like, hey. So I never like to look confused, eh? I was like, now I can't embarrass myself. Like someone who did not have a plan. You know, sometimes when you're looking at us from hindsight, you're thinking we had the blueprint all along. We did not, oh. God downloads this as you go. So I was like, okay, what did I say that attracted these people? Friendship, okay, godliness. Anyway, I put up a thing. I said, we're going to introduce yourself. And then they started saying, I am 48, I'm married, I'm a lawyer. And I was like, oh, Lord. There were all kinds of different women. And we start to pray online. And we do that for that whole year of COVID. And COVID was long. So we do a study, we pray. And because remember, I am a discipleship pastor. So if anything I know how to do is to put people in spaces of discipleship. So I didn't even know how prepared I was. You know how God prepares you for your assignment before you know He's preparing you? So right then I told them, groups of 20. We cannot create intimacy when we are this many. Groups of 20. Based on their profiles, I picked a leader, called, trained, gave them material. Let's do this. Report to me at this. There was a whole system. And we did that for a year, and it was amazing. But 2021 happened, and girl went back to her life. See, that was a COVID thing. See, me, I am a church planter. So we went back to church planting for young people. Yes. Cut the long story short, last year, 2023, I had known that God had given me assignment for a long time, but I did not know how to do it. So I kept wondering, these women continue to stay in the group. And we are not saying anything. We are all quiet there together. Quietly there, I'm like, what do? I don't know. Because I used to think a physical meeting, me, I am not a woman's ministry person. What will I tell older women? So I never had it. And then I started to really feel, but I'm being disobedient. So January 2023, after 21 days of fastings, which I know you all do, even in this church, I wrote 2 things that I was going to do. I told God I'm going to commit to pray with these women once a month, 1 hour. Doable, right? I am giving you blueprint to becoming. It means taking that one simple step to arising. This arising. You think sometimes it's a thunderous arising. It starts with obeying now. I was like, 1 hour only. I did that. Guess how many came? Month 1, 2, month 2, 3. And there are so many. Up to April or May, the biggest meeting, and now I had even become, I would put it on Instagram, on Google Meet, so that at least if they don't come here, they are over to see it. You get what I'm saying? But still the audience was not. But I remembered the Lord, I had committed that I will do it regardless. Okay? Fast forward, I'm feeling very discouraged with it. I'm thinking maybe I should drop this. And then I'm like, okay, but it doesn't cost me a thing. I already promised, isn't it? So I say I will not keep getting myself embarrassed, posting online and no one even likes or responds. So I had just found out about TikTok. And actually, I should say, June was the month. I was very discouraged about this thing. And I happened to go to Glow that Pastor Cheryl leads. And I remember thinking, wow, this woman has it. She knows how this thing is done. But I was like, I love what you're doing. I admire it, but I don't know where to start. Does that make sense? And I was asking the Lord, did you allow me to come to this meeting, to be able to see? Because as far as you can see, I will give you. Is that what you're saying, that I can see this and go duplicate? I didn't fully understand it at the time. Anyway, I put up a graphic. I opened a TikTok account. I call it God's Girl Army. I am like, no one knows who is behind God's Girl Army anyway. So I put it there and I put a song and then I put my number. I said, if you're a girl, you want to pray, inbox me. Again, I woke up, but this time it was 5,000 women from all over the world. Literally all over. About 5,000 on that day, that very day. Because I didn't even know capacity for WhatsApp group had now increased to 1,025 people. You see, I even know how many. I opened another one, 1,025. I opened another. To where I'm standing right now, I checked this week, we are about 18,000 women. Come on. Yeah? And it moved from me wanting to pray once a month, and we started praying daily. It has moved from us praying online to women meeting physically in the different nations they are in the different cities they are in. Okay? And a movement was born out of simple obedience. Okay? Since then, God and I have figured out how it is me He has called for the women of this generation. So I need you. Tell your neighbor to shine. Tell your neighbor, arise and For your light has, and the glory of the Lord. The glory of the Lord is say it again. The glory of the Lord is Waridi 2024. It's been such a delight to be able to share my journey with you. God bless you, Dr. Marion, for having me. God bless you so much.